Started. Are we live, Lisa?
We are now.
All right. Welcome to our Committee of Adjustments meeting. At this time, if you have any cell phones or devices, if you can put them on mute, please, or vibrate, that would be very much appreciated. At this time, I will introduce our staff that are here. To my immediate left is our CAO, Adam Sabansky. Over to my far right over there is Ken Melanson, Manager of Planning and Development, and Randy Burke, Planner. Corinne Nada is on virtual with us. She is our Chief Building Official. And Lisa Smeekins is our Planning Technician, and she is the one behind the computer. I will introduce our committee. To my right is our member Jennifer Turk. To the right of her is Councillor Mike Vasey. To my immediate left after Adam is Deputy Mayor Nettie McEwen and committee member Les Goldhawk. And I am the chair. My name is Bruce Holt. Thank you. At this time, if any members have a pecuniary interest, please declare that at the time when it's appropriate. At this time, I have a motion. Motion by Mike Vasey, seconded by Nettie McEwen, that the minutes of the regular Committee of Adjustments meeting held September 12th, 2023 be approved as presented. All those in favor? That's carried. We will move on to our minor variance application number A-2223. Take notice that an application has been made by Travis Bowman, agent for Scott and Hanan Natswold, with respect to the property known as Concession Front, Part Lot 5, Plan 13, Lot 8, Town of Plympton-Wyoming, 3156 Douglas Road. The subject property is zoned environmental protection, Lakeshore EPL, and residential 5R5. The following variance has been requested for proposed single detached dwelling. A variance of approximately 4.6 meters to permit the proposed front yard setback to be approximately 3.4 meters, notwithstanding the minimum front yard setback of 8 meters as per table A of the zoning bylaw. Number two, a variance of 1% as the proposed total lot coverage of all buildings and structures would be 26%, notwithstanding the maximum lot coverage of 25% as per table B of the zoning bylaw. And number three, a variance of 1.2 meters to prevent the proposed interior side yard setback to be 1.2 meters, notwithstanding the minimum interior side yard setback of 2.4 meters as per section 3.3.4. or 3 of the zoning bylaw. This is a deferral from a previous application. I will now refer to our planner, Randy Burke.
Thank you, the chair. So as you mentioned, the applicant seeking relief from 3 provisions of the zoning bylaw. And the proposed structure is intended to replace the current accessory structure. The application was heard at the September committee meeting, in which it recommended deferral to look at kind of the size and location of the structure. With that, since the previous meeting, the applicant has provided staff with a new further setback, so a new location, as well as decrease the size of the structure, placing it entirely within the residential R5 zone. As the lot is dual zone between environmental protection Lakeshore and R5. The application was analyzed against relevant legislation, including the provincial policy statement, the County of Lambton official plan, the Town of Plympton-Wyoming official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw. With that, the analysis did include the 4/10 of a minor variance. So starting with the first one is the requested variance minor. Although the applicant has decreased the size of the structure and intends to replace the current structure there, they are proposing a decreased front yard setback of 3.4 meters, and the structure will ultimately still result in covering 44% of that lot frontage. So there are still issues or concerns with visual impacts for pedestrians, drivers. Therefore, the variance cannot be deemed minor. The second is the general intent of the official plan maintained. So in the town official plan, the subject lands are designated for the proposed use, and this St. Clair Conservation Authority has no issues with the proposed structure. So therefore, the general intent of the town official plan is maintained. The third is the general intent of the zoning bylaw maintained. So the property is zoned residential and environmental protection lakeshore. Again, the structure is located wholly within the R5 zone. So for the required setbacks, they have to be held against the R5 provisions. So this includes the front yard setback. The minimum front yard setback is 8 meters in the R5 zone, and they are proposing a setback of 3.4 meters. And as I said, it is proposed to take up almost half of the front lot line. So with the decreased setback and the size of the structure, visual and safety impacts, especially regarding backing in and out of the driveway that is on the lot currently, as well as getting structure items in and out of the proposed structure as the updated drawing, the doors are facing on Douglas Street, so there could be issues with backing in and out with that decreased setback as well. Overall, the zoning bylaw provisions are intended to establish appropriate development policies and standards. So based on the above, the intent of the zoning bylaw is not maintained. And finally, is the application desirable and appropriate for the subject lands? So an overview of other accessory structures in the area was on the street specifically was completed. And the average accessory structure was around 28.75 square meters, with only one other structure being of similar size. However, that structure did have a setback of approximately 13 meters, whereas this structure is proposing a 3.4 meters. So with that, it does not necessarily keep with the neighborhood characteristics. Like I mentioned, visual and safety impacts are considered here. And based on those 4 reasons, staff are recommending denial. There is an alternate recommendation available with the conditions if you choose to go that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Boma, Mr. Scott Knotswold is also on virtually. I would imagine that you'll be speaking on his behalf. Is that
Yes, I will be.
or is yours?
All right. Just wanted to, I guess, first note, thank you for the deferral so we could reassess with my client. Just want to note, I guess, the differences that we did take into consideration when you had the conversation last time. The size of the garage, we went from 30 by 30 to 26 by 30. We did make sure that the decrease was the presence from the road. So the portion that you see from the road, that's the portion that we decreased from, not the depth. The depth was important to the owner because he has a boat that he's trying to store in here that would need the 30 feet in order for him to fit the entire thing in the trailer inside. So we did decrease what you see from the road. The square footage went from 900 square feet to 750 square feet. The height went from 17'6" down to 16. And then we did slightly increase the request or slightly push the building back so that we have 3.4 meters or almost 3.5 instead of the previously requested 3 meters. And then we also took into consideration the concern of parking in the garage when the garage doors were on the side. That there was a concern that we would have to take, space from the neighbor or drive on the neighbor's lawn. Therefore, we addressed it and faced the garage front doors front. Other items to note, the current garage is 424 square feet. Or 39.46 square meters. It in itself, if we had to replace it in its current state, we would need a front yard setback reduction, a side lot line reduction. We wouldn't need this square footage. If we were to push it back to the 8 meters, we would then need relief from lot coverage. The building would be too big. We're required to have 30 square meters and 30 instead of 39. So even the current garage, if we were to rebuild the current garage in its state, would require us to come here. Whenever I do designs, my ultimate goal is to try and avoid this situation. But I think in this case here, our hands are a little bit tied, partially to do with the difference between the EPL, you know, that line where that is, and the restrictions, a little bit of the lot. This, I imagine all of you went to site. This is not, you know, the 402 or Highway 40 or even, you know, a general side street. I mean, this is barely a 1-lane road. There's 3 other people that are on the other side. So this is not a well-traveled, high-traffic road. Therefore, we don't necessarily see the concern of high traffic of backing in and out, people walking by all the time. Like there's barely many people that live in this little section. Again, just wanted to reiterate the main reason why we're pushing the garage forward instead of getting the 8 meters is we would like a little bit of buffer space between the home and the garage. Mainly they would like to create a bit of a patio area that's on the south side of the home, so that on those windy days, they can sit on the south sunny side. So they would like to be able to create that space. So that's why we've pushed it a little bit forward. And just another note, you know, in the zoning bylaw, it does allow for driveways, the driveway width, regardless of the width of the lot, to be 9 meters or 29.5 feet, which is essentially what most people would make their garage, is the same width as their driveway. And the new proposal is less than that, so.
All right. Anything more to add? Anything from planning from what Mr. Boma has said? Okay. From what I understand, we did not receive necessarily correspondence, but it was a telephone call. Lisa, would you want to share the telephone call?
Yes, we received a telephone call from Judy Wellington. She is the owner of Douglas Street, as it is a private road. She noted that the proposed garage would not directly affect her because she does not use the road, as she does not live on it. Her concern was just that it might set a precedence for large buildings to be built too close to the road, which, seeing as the road is very narrow, that could be a concern.
Excuse me, at this time. Oh, you have something to add? Go ahead,
And
Adam.
I can echo that concern from Public Works, although Public Works does no maintenance on that roadway as it is a true private road. Our fire department has recently expressed their concerns with those private roadways and their ability to bring the fire trucks down those roadways. So narrowing the roadway with buildings could cause additional challenges depending on how they're constructed and the location and parked cars.
All right, I'll move to our committee for questions, and I'll start with my deputy mayor, Nettie McEwen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for trying to rearrange your drawings and all that. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it's still way too close to the road. And having it that close, even, I know it's for boat storage, you know, I'm sorry he's trying to put a building around his already bought and built. It doesn't justify a minor variance in my opinion, so. And any of these minor variances that are requested aren't minor, but you know, if you wanted to go home and change some more dimensions, that's I'm certainly willing to listen. That's my opinion. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but anyway, yeah, I'm afraid I can't. Minor variances are for when you cannot meet the requirements. They're not for because you don't want to. So, and that's the basis. So, that's the end of my comments at the moment.
Okay, Les?
Only one comment that I had was, that 1%, like just being able to get down in size to get to 25% is. I don't know how much more has to be reduced to get to that, then that takes away one of the variances. I did make a couple of notes that. The setback that's being requested is actually more than what the garage is, the current garage is there right now. The side yard setback, actually more than what the current garage has right now as well.
Okay, that's it. Jennifer?
So I still can't support this minor variance the way it's been presented. It's still too big in my opinion for where it is, and it doesn't meet the four tests of the zoning bylaw or through the planning act. The county official plan isn't maintained. There's just a lot of things that are going on here that's not met, and I just can't support it.
All right, Counselor Vacy?
Yes, I'm in line with everyone else on this, that it's too big. There's a 2-car garage there now. And we want to double that. I understand why and all that. Has there been any thought to attaching it to the house on the right side? And then you don't have garage and laneway all in, you know what I mean? The laneway goes into the garage instead of beside it, which would save a lot of the front yard. You would back away from the road. I know you're into the LP zone. But to me, that makes more sense than where it's at, but as it sits, I can't support it.
Go ahead,
Through the chair. Again, we're dealing with a bit of a good old conservation authority. So essentially the conservation authority would actually not allow us to attach it. And I think we might even actually be over the square footage for the zoning bylaw as it relates to the EPL, like the EPL has a maximum. So by attaching it, I believe I'd have to go for variance there, and the conservation authority would only allow us to increase our footprint by 50%, but we actually increased it in 2017. So I think they'd be hesitant to give it to us again. So that would be the concern. I can't remember the layout, but I do actually also think there's a bedroom, excuse me, there's a bedroom window on that one side that would complicate things.
You know more than I do.
so anything from planning before I
Sorry,
have
Mr.
this
Chair.
discussion?
Yeah, we were just conferring, so I think it's safe to say that no matter what option is pursued here, some sort of minor variance is going to be needed, because if the building moves, it's very close to and potentially could be into the EPL zone, and as we learned last meeting, even if you go over it by a nanometer, the EPL zone rules apply. That doesn't mean that I don't think that there's options available, but I think committee needs to understand that some sort of variance is going to be needed here. This is one of those odd situations where no matter what zone you're working in, the lot and its shape creates some complexity. That said, staff have always been open to looking at other alternatives. So if committee wishes to refer this back again, we will sit with Mr. Boma and go through a whole bunch of different options to look at where it could be, what the Conservation Authority was willing to accept and not accept, and narrow down some options here. But I think committee needs to understand that this will likely come back with some sort of variance. To what extent, I can't say, but we can always go back and look at all alternatives.
So, Mr. Boma, you've heard some of the comments from our committee. Would you be, I mean, I'm not taking a poll vote here, but I can kind of know which way we're gonna go if I call the vote. There is a option, as planning is willing to work with you as far as if we defer this once again.
Right.
If the committee is okay with that, and if that would be acceptable to you and Mr. Knotsville.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep dragging this thing on either. I do definitely agree with Ken. Believe me, I've researched, I think, multiple different ways, and every time well, it's one of those things, to me, it's a little tough because it's like, essentially, if I do this, and my front yard is not my front yard 3 meters, as soon as I'm in the EPL.
Yeah, and that therein, Mr. Chair, lie. Yeah. Is it 6 in the EPL?
It's 6 meters or 3?
Right, 3 or I think 3 is the reduced to confirm. Didn't double check that, but
Yeah, so this, sorry, please begin. So this is where I wanted that meeting to discuss the EPL. Was, and I understand when I was canceled, no problems there on either end. But anyways, that's where I get confused, is it's kind of like, so I keep this building the same size. I give it a touch, I give it by a foot, I'm now in the EPL. So then I'm now allowed to use the reduced yards, which then allows me to have a 3 meter setback. So that's where you can see, but now all of a sudden, because I've done this, I'm now in the EPL, my lot coverage is supposed to be 30 square meters instead of 90 square meters. So now all of a sudden, the variance for that seems more extreme, right? So, and I realize there's some sort of happy medium massage that I gotta find out.
So my suggestion would be, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity from the last deferral to have a discussion with planning at all, and maybe. My suggestion would be is that maybe that discussion could happen. I'm willing to put a deferral motion on the floor if that would be acceptable to what you would like to do.
Yeah, I would like to ultimately see, a resolution, obviously, that everybody's happy with.
So I'll put this motion on the floor. I have a motion by Jennifer Turk, seconded by Mike Basie, that the report by Randy Burke dated October 6th, 2023 regarding application A 2223 3156 Douglas Street be received, and that application A 2223 be oh, I thought I had sorry, my fault. I thought I had the deferral one. That's the one I would like. Sorry, my apologies.
I'm just looking.
So you don't want to downsize that building at all.
Thanks, Jennifer. Sorry.
Well, I'm gonna talk to them about doing this, because I think this is but when I do.
Close, I didn't have my glasses on.
Ultimately, it does help me because of the triangle. Like, I mean, on the far side, I have more than 6 meters
On the far side.
this way, on the far side, right? Just because of the way the angle goes and the building has to be square. So I'm 3 meters here, but I'm like 7 meters here, right? So obviously, if I do this, right? But I ultimately think it comes down to is that 30 feet is going to be something.
Maybe you should talk your owner into storing his boat somewhere else.
Mike, you have your hand up?
Just a comment or a question. Why don't you move the garage to the other side of the lot? And you pick up more of your EP zone and pull it away from the road more.
Well, the front door's on that side.
Anyway, I think the discussion probably can happen with planning. So I have the motion. I had everything correct except the last word. So I have a motion here by Jennifer Turk, seconded by Mike Basie, that the report by Randy Burke dated October 6th, 2023 regarding application A 2223 3156 Douglas Street be received and the application A 2223 be deferred. All those in favor? That's carried. See you again. Great. Let's move on to our next variance. If it's okay with the committee, I would like to read both notices as one notice. Yeah, so we'll have to vote for them separately. But once again, the minor variance is follows with the severance. So it's okay with the committee. I will read both notices and we'll have discussion on both, but vote on them separately, if that's okay with the committee. Good, thank you. So minor variance application A 2423. Take notice that an application has been made by Chelsea Cooper, agent for Edward Cooper, with respect to the property known as Lot 17, Front Concession Plan 3, Park Lot 25, 0 King Street, Town of Plympton, Wyoming. The subject property is zoned residential 5, R5, with a hazard H overlay by the Town of Plympton, Wyoming zoning bylaw. The application is proposing to retain an access to their lands through a frontage on King Street. The following variance has been requested. One, a variance of approximately 13.2 meters, 43.3 feet to permit the proposed lot frontage to be approximately 4.8 meters, 15.7 feet, notwithstanding the minimum lot coverage of 18 meters, 59.1 feet as per table A of the zoning bylaw 97 of 23. And the other is a severance, sorry, I forget my notes. Oh, severance application, excuse me, number B dash 1321. Take notice an application was made by Chelsea Cooper, agent for Edward Cooper, with respect to property known as Lot 17, Front Concession Plan 3, Park Lot 25, 0 King Street, Town of Plympton, Wyoming. The applicant is requesting a consent to sever approximately 24,349.85 square meters, 262,207.2 square feet of land from the above named property. The severed land is proposed to create 3 new lots. The retained portion being merged to 6734 King Street. The severed and retained lands are zoned residential 5 R5 by the Town of Plympton, Wyoming bylaw. At this time, I believe it's Ken, you're going to talk on this. Go ahead. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, committee. So I'm going to do a joint presentation for applications and just some history as to how we got here and where we're at. Committee will recall in summer of this year, the application came before you for consideration, and staff recommended that you not approve it. Well, I should say staff recommended that it be approved subject to the retained portion of land being merged with the residence that the applicant owns, which is just below the subject site. And that was because of the fact that the retained portion of land, if it is not merged with another parcel, becomes a lot. And that lot must meet the zoning bylaw requirements for the zone that applies. And as Mr. Chairman pointed out, zoning that applies to this site is R5. So the issue at hand that came up in that meeting was there was no desire by the applicant to merge the retained portion, which you see in blue, with the residence at 6734 King Street. That creates a challenge that the remnant or retained portion of land doesn't meet the minimum frontage requirement of the R5 zone. The flag portion of the lot, if you think of this as a giant flagpole, retained portion, does not meet that minimum requirement. And so a variance would be needed, or the lotting pattern would have to be adjusted, which based on our mathematics, it could have been to avoid the variance. So committee tabled the matter, consented back to staff to work with the applicants. We met with the applicants, pardon me, subsequent to that and discussed the option of changing the lotting pattern to avoid a variance. The applicants were unwilling to change their proposal. They wanted to leave it as it was. As a result, that means that there's no choice but to do a variance because of the current zoning. However, we did make it very clear to the applicants at that point that the ask for the variance was significant and would be a challenge for us to support. That said, we zoomed out in the GIS map and realized that there is a parcel of land just off of Timber Ridge Road that is owned by the Conservation Authority that is doing exactly the same thing as what the applicants have indicated they want to do with the retained portion, which is to leave it as woodland for private purposes such as going into the woodland to tap maple syrup and just recreational purposes of their own. So after realizing that we could also apply the same zoning here, we discussed the option of pursuing a rezoning to woodlot. Because the woodlot zone has no minimum frontage and no minimum area requirement. The only concern that was expressed by the applicant regarding that was essentially timing of getting the rezoning done. So what we agreed to in discussing the options to pursue this application was we would not normally, and I think we were very clear in our report to you for the variance, we would not normally support this variance request. It would not normally meet the tests. However, what pushes this over into being supportable is the condition that the remnant or retained lands be rezoned to woodlot. And what that will do is it will essentially negate the need for a variance once the zoning is changed. So the conditions proposed for the minor variance is that it be approved with a condition to rezone to woodlot. And that once that happens, the minor variance is then deemed no longer applicable and canceled because it's no longer needed because the minimum frontage is no longer an issue, nor is the lot area an issue. And as I say, the concern was they wanted to start moving forward with their severance, hence the reason why we're here for a minor variance. If we were able to get the rezoning done first, we would not have the minor variance in front of you because obviously it would be redundant. The second portion of this application, the severance, is brought back to you with revised conditions that remove the requirement for the retained portion to be merged with 6734, considering that the variance will have the condition to rezone. Now, we have not applied the rezoning condition to the severance because it is a condition of the variance. You could apply it. But that would prevent them from moving forward with severance until the rezoning is in place. And that would also include completion of an appeal period. We have left it off. We're content with the condition on the variance. I'm going to leave it to committee to make a decision as to whether you wish to apply the condition to both. We are satisfied, given the applicant's willingness to submit the rezoning application and to accept it as a condition of the variance, that's sufficient. We are recommending approval of the variance subject to conditions noted in the report, and we are recommending approval of the severance with the revised conditions contained in the supplementary report, which will remove the requirement to merge the retained portion to 6734. That's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chelsea or Ted, anything to add to the?
I think the only thing that's notable for the committee is that when we purchased this piece of property, it was zoned significant woodlot. And somewhere between the time we purchased and today, it got changed to R5 somehow. But we didn't make an application for that. Our intent all along was it was going to be maintained as a woodlot. The front portion was going to be severed for homes. So I don't know how that actually happened. We didn't make an application and we didn't want it to be zoned R5. So I think that's important. And so to make this happen, the severance happen and the flagpole, we were willing to go through the hoops of whatever we have to do to get that change back to what it originally was.
And inherently, whether you went through the hoops to bring it to residential to allow a severance, or going through the hoops now to bring it back to a woodlot, you still have to jump that hoop, unfortunately. So depends which direction.
I'd just like to add, Mr. Chair, I wanted to say thank you because I do feel like obviously we've been doing this for several years and we were a little defeated after the last one, and it sounds now like we're confident, planning's confident that this will keep in spirit with the residential neighborhood. It will also maintain the woodlot for the purposes that, you know, our family wants, but also what the community wants because of the development all around there. And we, you know, the unique way that we came about this seems to be the best way that it probably could have been done perfectly. So.
Okay, thank you. Lisa, any correspondence that we've received for this application?
No, there's no additional correspondence other than the agencies that were included in the planning report.
Thank you. I will ask my committee for their questions. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So the only concern I have is that in the consent, we don't make any reference to the minor variances being a condition. But in the minor variance, we make a condition that we have to have a zoning bylaw. So I'm not sure which way it needs to go, but it needs to be stipulated, I think, in the severance that a zoning bylaw is required. With all these conditions that you have to meet, it's gonna take time anyways. And you have 2 years before your consent is approved anyways and stamped. And just because we approve it tonight, you still have to go through all the hoops to fulfill all the conditions anyways. And that's not gonna be done overnight anyways, so.
Is there a world in which the condition, if it references the minor variance, could give a stipulation for, you know, clearing or like the next steps for the severance in between while we're working on it?
I'll refer to our planning.
Through your worship, or through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I guess I'm a lawyer, so I'm just spouting out an idea here. If could the condition, if it does have to reference the minor variance in the severance application, have some sort of wording that the timeline for that to be completed doesn't hold up the next steps on the severance, or does it have to be 100% conditional?
If I understand what you're trying to ask. I think what you're trying to get at is, will the rezoning be done in an expedient way so as you can continue to work on the other conditions, right? Like you wanna get the rezoning done while you're dealing with all the other conditions for the severance. So that in an ideal world, you'd have it all done together and thus complete the conditions.
Yeah.
So the challenge with. How do I put this? A minor variance has, or sorry, a rezoning has very specific requirements under the Planning Act in terms of notice. There's a public meeting that is required, things like that. That can't be exempted. That's a provincial requirement. So the challenge becomes timing. The other challenge becomes that there is a requirement for an application to be circulated to certain agencies as well. And then there has to be a notice put on the property. So setting a time without knowing where that would be is difficult. But what I could say as a general answer, and I think I'd have to look to Lisa to confirm, but I think we had this quick chat this morning. Assuming you can submit an application, I think that likely we would be able to get you on an agenda for a council meeting by the end of the year, likely December, possibly January. So that gives you a rough idea, depending on, we would have to sit down and talk about what would be needed, but depending on the, like, this is a relatively straightforward application. So
There is approximately 80 trees that are gonna be removed. There is a period of time that you can remove them and a period of time when you can. And so if we get back into that, that means I'm gonna wait another year.
Well, Adam,
So it sounds like the applicant wants to obligate themselves to carry out the conditions of the severance through a legal agreement. Which we have done in the past through development agreements and subdivision agreements. But we typically only do that for infrastructure or infrastructure-like products. So if we were to allow you to create an agreement, which you would then be obligated to do the rezoning and the minor variance, the problem you create is you're tying this committee's and the public's hands. You're making a predisposed decision. Those are public processes in their own rights. They have appeal rights in their own rights. And by forming that agreement, it would essentially be a legal agreement because you're tying the hands of this committee and the public. So I don't think we can do
can't
that.
bind council to an outcome.
I have one more question, one more suggestion that is a possibility. Could it be that the severance is approved conditional on either it merging with 6734 or it being rezoned so that we can still proceed with the severance? Because either way, we're gonna do one or the other, so that if we weren't approved for the rezoning, we would have to obviously either merge it or revisit.
So the only way that the needs for the severance could be stamped is all of the conditions have to be met.
And then no clearing or anything can be done until Thursday.
Now, I don't think. Well, and I'll let Mr. Sabansky jump in after I say this. I do not,
Sorry, Ken, clearing, they jumped a question in there.
I was getting to the clearing one, so. I do not believe that the clearing issue is going to be impacted, provided that the clearing of those trees is on the lands that stay R5.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as an issue for the rezoning, because the rezoning is going to apply the woodlot zone only to the blue portion. So if you are clearing trees out in association with the EIS that you've submitted and that the
Right.
Conservation Authority has said, yeah, you're okay with, or they are okay with, and it's all on those pink parcels, then I don't see it as an issue. It wouldn't hold up your rezoning at
Oh,
all.
that's amazing. Thank you.
I would highly encourage you to contact the County of Lambton and Conservation Authority's woodlot enforcement officer.
Yes,
I did.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
but again, before you cut, because they'll likely
No
get a
problem.
phone call during the
Totally.
process, so.
Very nice gentleman.
All right, is that all your questions, Jennifer? Mike?
She asked mine.
Oh.
We can put a condition that if the zoning doesn't go through for some reason, that it has to be attached to the lot. That way it's. We have to. You asked it, they answered it, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I do have a couple questions. I don't know why you just didn't present the severance first and then we granted the severance, it would be granted on a condition that it was rezoning. And that would be site-specific rezoning. They wouldn't need a variance at all.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, we had this conversation with the applicant about doing the zoning first. And the concern I think that I got was they wanted everything done as fast as possible. There was a concern with timing. And so we proceeded with the minor variance because that was the best way to get this forward, because at the time that we were looking at the minor variance option, we had not yet come to the point of realizing that we could rezone to woodlot. It was sort of the last piece of the conversation and a sudden light bulb moment, quite frankly, in the conversation. But then there was this concern with time and wanting to move forward. I think what I'm hearing from committee is by adding the condition that's been suggested by the applicants onto the severance, it gives them a couple of options to move forward. But as I say, depending on when you get the material that we would need for a zoning bylaw amendment, we could, in theory, presuming that circulation and notice is maintained, possibly have you on the agenda for December or January for council to consider.
So it's just allowing, what that variance is doing is allowing them to move forward, and even if they don't have their zoning in place yet.
So if you approve the severance under the revised conditions right now, there is no condition requiring the retained portion of the land to be
But
merged with 6734, which means it becomes its own lot.
Yeah.
So in order for that to become its own lot, it needs a variance because it's R5. If the rezoning had been done the other way, we would not have a variance in front of you. So think of the variance as a temporary measure to get to the severance. But as a condition of that, we've put a requirement for the rezoning.
Any other questions?
If that makes, it's a bit unconventional.
yes, it is. Okay,
Les?
Other than the public notice, is it the town committee that, or council, I should say, that makes the final decision on this?
Through the chair, are you referring to a rezoning?
Yes.
Yes, that's a decision of council. So if you this evening approve the minor variance with the conditions proposed, and then you approve the severance, but then add the condition that has been suggested, then there would still be a rezoning application required to get to the severance, which they would then have heard by council. And it would be council's decision. And what that would do is if council was to decide not to approve the rezoning, then they would have another option to then merge with 6734, so that would insulate them to be able to proceed with the severance. And likewise, if council approved it, then that's the option B of this proposed condition. Well,
Okay. So Lisa, I'm not sure if you have that extra on our second, well, I didn't read it here, the suggestion. I'm wondering if we can rewrite that.
so Mr. Chairman, if I could, what I would suggest you do is this. First, if committee is of the mind to approve the variance with the conditions imposed, we make that decision. When we get to the severance, I think it's gonna be an easy condition. It would be essentially taking condition 1 of the minor variance and then adding on or merge the retained portion of land with 6734 King Street.
So,
And then you'd approve.
yeah, so I'm gonna move forward then with the minor variance. I have a motion by Jennifer Turk, seconded by Mike Vasey, that the Plympton-Wyoming Committee of Adjustment approve application A24-2023, subject to the following conditions. The property owners submit and obtain a rezoning to the woodlot WD zone for the remnant lands parcel within 6 months of the approval of this minor variance. And number 2, upon receiving approval of the zoning bylaw amendment and the applicable bylaw coming into force, this variance shall expire and cease to be valid. Call the question. All those in favor? All right, that's carried. So. Can we write up this other,
I'm just adding it right now.
give us a few minutes?
I asked one clarifying question.
Sure, you can ask lots.
I'm learning lots. If we were to approve, or you were to approve the severance application without the amended condition, it does, and the condition states that it's still just to be rezoned, would we still have the option of clearing and moving forward within the period of doing the rezoning? Like, just because I think that maybe that would be persuasive with the next time we submit to you that we want it to be rezoned and not actually merged with 6734, because that's something that we really don't want to do if we don't have to. Because it sounds like maybe we're not held up either way, so we could still proceed and have the rezoning be the condition.
So through you, Mr. Chair, if the condition only states that you have to rezone the parcel, then what happens if council was to say no?
So I guess.
Then the condition never gets fulfilled. So I think what committee is trying to suggest, if that outcome were to happen, then you have you take what's behind door number 1 or door number 2, right? And so that way, if for some reason council was to say no, then you have the other alternative option, despite the fact that's not your ideal. Because either way, the lot, if it doesn't merge and it's not rezoned, then it's a lot that's non-compliant. I think what that
Then it would.
does is it
become-
provides you some safety that if for some reason council was to say no, you have another way.
But it also could become a standalone lot then on its own, right?
No, you cannot, not until you get a rezoning.
No, if the rezoning fails,
If the rezoning fails and it's just that condition, then the severance never gets approved.
I agree, yeah. If we have.
So what happens-
That retained with 6734, the severance is gone. We're gonna take the severance away.
Well, what would happen is none of the 3 lots would be created either.
We'll end up with one lot, we'll sell it to a developer.
And I think from my perspective, the or portion, the alternative to merge would only happen if council was to say no.
Yeah,
I
and
think it's in your interest.
that's what I'm worried about, right?
I guess.
And say no.
You can't. Council has to make its own mind up. Based on public input and based on planning's recommendation. I can't speak for them or give you an indication one way or another, but
I understand.
just to give you some
I just wanted to voice my concern that if
committees.
it has to be merged with 6734, you will withdraw the severance. And
Yeah, there's an option to actually.
And that's something you can present to council at the time of.
Okay, yeah,
that's good. Perfect. Appreciate that.
We're just waiting on our printer and whatnot to get done.
These services that are going to be installation of services are water, sewer, that sort of thing. Am I correct, Lisa?
Yeah.
Sorry, Randy.
Through the chair, my understanding is that condition relates to services for the future homes that would be on
Yeah.
that month 1, 2, and 3. The bulk of the conditions there are usually public works.
That's fine.
All right. I have a motion by Nettie McEwen, seconded by Les Goldhawk, that the Plympton-Wyoming Committee of Adjustment approve application B13 2021, subject to the following amended conditions. Drainage assessment on the severed parcels be reapportioned according to the agreement signed by the respective property owners and provided by the town. If the parties cannot mutually agree to the apportionment, or if the town does not approve, the applicant shall pay the engineering fees incurred by the engineer selected by the town. The fees will be paid prior to the stamping of the deeds. Number 2, a copy of the deed and survey must be submitted to the secretary treasurer in a form suitable for registration. Number 3, additional severance fees as required by the town be paid before the documents will be endorsed. Number 4, the conditions must be met and the survey and deed be presented within 2 years from the date of the decision or the consent will lapse. Number 5, overall grading plan and individual lot grading plans must be provided prior to the permit issuance. Number 6, the applicant obtains a service installation application approval for the installation of services to the satisfaction of the town. Number 7, each lot must have an individual access installed in accordance with the streets bylaw 79 of 2018. And number 8, the property owners submit and obtain a rezoning to woodlot WD zone for the remnant lands parcel, or that the remnant lands be conveyed to the abutting property 6734 King Street and merged on title through section 53 of the Planning Act. Is that clear? All those in favor? That motion is carried. There's a 20-day appeal period, obviously, and what you can be working with planning and obviously sending that to council. Once again, this application began in 2021. Thank you very much for working with us through all of the planners that you've had and whatnot, and good luck with council and getting that zoning bylaw changed. Thank you.
thank you so much, yeah. Great.
I just need to keep it.
Thank you.
All right, let's move forward to our business arising from the previous minutes. Lisa, do we have anything that is arising from our last minutes? All right. Okay, well, business or new business, so I will go through my committee and through my planning, planners. I'll start with our planners, any new business that you guys would like to bring up? Okay, Mike,
Nothing for me, sir.
Jennifer,
No.
Nettie, Les,
No, it's just on the next point in the meeting. There's no November meeting.
yeah, so I believe that Lisa probably was going to, I believe there's no applications for November. So our next meeting will be in December.
That is correct.
Lisa, anything?
No.
And Adam, would you have anything for new business for the committee? Well, at this time. I have a motion by Les Goldhawk. Seconded by Nettie McEwen that the Committee of Adjustments meeting be adjourned and the next meeting will be scheduled for December the 12th. 2023 at 5:15 PM. All those in favor? That motion's carried.